Great-great-grandfather, Heber J. Grant, and my great-great-grandmother, Augusta Winters Grant. So we're going back to a period of early Utah history, to the time from 1884 when they were married until 1896 when Utah became a state. And I'd like to weave some family stories in as well. But if any of you have moved to Park City and don't have any Mormon family background, you might want to listen. And we could see if maybe I could share the abundance of Mormon family heritage that I have with any of you, be from Venezuela or Nugget. Yeah, maybe we can see if you ever feel uncomfortable, if you'd like to borrow some of these stories. Let's begin with my grandmother. She was a school teacher, and she was a school teacher in a town we just know as Mill Creek, just a part of suburbia, down at the mouth of Carlie's Canyon. But back in those days, they called it Mill Creek. And one of her students was asked years later to give a tribute. And she said, "We loved Miss Winters. Picture, if you will, a one-room schoolhouse, well-lighted, with a stove in the center, with lively adolescent boys and girls." She said she was our ideal. She was fair and charming, and her beauty was renowned. So they got to look at someone fair and charming, but they said it was her patience and understanding, that if they got something wrong or failed to complete an assignment, she always knew that she could work with them and that they had a good heart. She also had dramatic talent, and she had a keen sense of humor so that the monotony of the days in the school were broken. Well, one May, in May 22nd, in 1884, she went down. The Salt Lake Temple hadn't been completed, but she met Heber in what was then known as the Endowment House. It was a small edifice that the Latter-day Saints built to perform their rituals until the temple was completed and they could do it there. And he married her. In her journal, she said it was the happiest day of her life. She'd turned down several other offers, but it was interesting. I know they had a wonderful banquet that night to celebrate, but I also know there wasn't a honeymoon, because the very next day, he married his third wife, Emily H. Wells. I made a chart. It does get complicated. The day they got married, things got complicated. And there was a harbinger going on because the federal government wasn't really thrilled about the polygamous practices of the Mormons. So he married Emily H. Wells. They had grown up together and were actually sweethearts. 7 years later, he married Lucy Stringham. So you might think of my grandmother as the sandwich. She was the second wife. But things work out for the sandwich. Things are good. It just takes time. And you might wonder, why was his sweetheart the third wife? Isn't that interesting? Well, they had grown up together. Her father was the first, Daniel H. Wells, the first governor, and his father was Jedediah M. Grant, the first mayor. And they had been young orators together in the Literary Association, Heber and Emily, and Lucy as well. But Emily rebelled. She thought polygamy was a bad idea. So when he proposed to her when they were just 20, she said, "Oh, my dead body, you know I'm not in on this." But I guess by the time he married my grandmother, she had come around, and he took her as her third wife. Well, within 3 years, the Edmunds-Tucker Act came out. Grover Cleveland, when he was on the stump, it was an election year, and he was making promises, we're going to do away with polygamy in the Utah Territory. So overnight, this man who prided himself on being honest, a man of integrity, overnight became a criminal. He was caught. Devotion to his church said he took more than one wife, but the federal government would now imprison him for up to 5 years if they caught him, or he could be fined $800, which was quite a sum in those days. And if he went to prison, there would be no one to support the wives. So it was really a tough thing. They should have had happiness at being married, Instead, they went on the underground. They had to live in different places. He could have Lucy with him, but that was it. The other wives could not be seen. But leave it to my grandmother. She went back to New York and took a second name, A.K. Bennett, and started going to the opera. Seats were just $2.50. And there were other Utahns who invited her out for the night. So it was tough to be away from her husband, but often he had to travel to New York to try and get loans. They actually confiscated all of the church's finances. They dissolved the organization. It was not a compassionate law at all. They didn't grandfather people in. Instead, these people had to go on the underground and had to try and find a way to keep the church going. But the good news is, I think there are two things. As hard as the Edmunds-Tucker Act was for these people, it did do away with polygamy, which I think for people today, it simplified life. And it also led to the two deaths of the early deaths of the other women. It was so stressful that they died. Lucy first in 1898, and then Emily died. So that my grandmother was his only wife when he became the seventh prophet of the Mormon Church. He held that position from 1918 to 1945. And today actually is his birthday. We went to a reunion last night and there were 200 people gathered, and this is a picture of the birthday party. After the raids, they called them, that the federal marshals put, the families were scattered. She was in New York. Emily had to go to Colorado. So the birthday parties were a big deal, that the patriarch could sit there and be celebrated, gather his family around him. The manifesto had come, and there was no more polygamy. Thank you.